Hello, and welcome to Release Day, the podcast series that dives into the stories and strategies of how Canada's music community are releasing their art to the world. I'm your host, Alex Heward. My conversation today is with indie pop singer-songwriter Julie Neff. On January 27th, 2021, Julie, originally from Guelph, Ontario, released Over It, a 6-song EP she describes as a project that shines a light on the open heart needed for vulnerability while planting one's feet firmly on the ground to create the healthy boundaries we need in our lives. Julie and I have a great conversation about music, the design process of branding the project, and how her experiences and exposure to different cultures from living abroad have had an influence on her promotional strategy. But we also get into some pretty tough conversations about dealing with toxic coworkers and toxic work environments, and the continued existence of sexism in the music industry. Julie's firsthand experience with these encounters are a driving narrative within the songs on this EP. But before we get to that conversation, we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Land acknowledgements mark a small and important step in the process of reconciliation and building a positive relationship with our country's Indigenous peoples. Now be sure to stick around after the interview as Graham and I highlight some music industry news and share the artists we've had in rotation for the past week. A rising star in the Canadian music scene, Julie's season-long forays to Brazil and Spain have created a passionate international fan base and are a testament to the same passion and persistence infused in her music. Now our conversation begins on a bit of a lighter note: thrift shopping.
I'm a big thrift shop fan, so I love to wander around and hit the thrift shops. Less of an option these days, but always fun. And I actually get a ton of enjoyment out of that, like the colors and the different things you can find in vintage clothes that you can find nowadays. And also I love the challenge of finding something in a thrift shop, because you have only one size and one color usually of that thing. So that's kind of nice, and it takes away a little bit of decision fatigue.
And what kind of thrift shop? Because I know there's Value Village thrift shop, and then there's, I don't know if you're familiar with F as in Frank in Toronto, then there's upscale thrift shopping, or does it matter?
Alex, I'm so glad you asked, because
hard-hitting questions.
I'm open to all. I would say I'm open to all. I love being able to find something in a Value Village or a Salvation Army or a charity run thrift shop, because you get can get crazy deals and really random finds. They're less curated, Yep. But I do love, in Toronto, there's Siberia Vintage that I actually have a ton of my outfits come from there. It's a little bit pricier, but I get some really cool things. And Public Butter is a really good one in Toronto as well. So I would say I'm accepting of all thrift shops.
Great. That's awesome. Now you've spent a lot of time abroad as well. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how living abroad and working with, in other cultures has helped to shape your music and perhaps even you as a person by being exposed to those different cultures and languages.
I think for me, so I'm not a diehard astrology person, but I am an Aquarius. And I do think that sometimes things just flow through, and I don't always know, I can't always pinpoint where that influence came from, that said, I think that learning other languages, and, I did a degree in Hispanic studies in university, and then I moved to Spain for a while, and that shaped me in such a big way. It really does expand your brain in an interesting way, to both from the language side of it in terms of learning new words and vocabulary. And I can't even imagine how much space in my brain is taken up by that. But also, from a phonetic perspective, I think it really opens things up to all these different sounds that you maybe couldn't even make before. And so, that would be something that I think influences me and probably how I sing and do things, but not in a way that I can pinpoint. And then more recently, in the past few years, have been spending some time in Brazil and with people in Brazil, just honestly, like seeing someone who I'm like, they have more talent in their pinky finger than I have in my whole body. And it's like, and then they're so humble and lovely about it, and I think they really appreciate music and are very communicative about it. So they'll tell you exactly what they loved about your song and how it moved them. And that for me has been a big motivator to keep going back, and a big motivator to keep doing music, to be quite honest. So that's been really cool. And then in that, the one maybe specific influence that I can pinpoint is in the song Over It on this EP, the title track. I did some of the pre-production with a friend of mine from Brazil. And so he kind of suggested the rhythmic influence that you find in there, which some friends of mine later called forrozinho, which is like forró is a type of music from the Northeast that was actually created, I think, during the time there's like an American military base there, and they used to have these dances that were called, like, they would say for all, and somehow that turned into forró. And so it's kind of like a nice influence of like being this thing that's for everybody, so yeah. And I think I often think about that track in particular of, Over It as about really being like so done with a situation. And the line is, I've been over it a while, but it's still not over. And how like the pandemic, for instance, but so many situations in our lives we get into, and we're maybe not able to make a change when we need to or when we want to. So we have to find a way to survive, to get through it. And I think that Brazilians have this resiliency that, that is really, truly amazing. And the ability to take moments within a really difficult period to dance, to laugh, to sing. So I thought that was a nice kind of nod to that experience that I've had there.
I'd like to talk about what this project means to you and what you hope the listeners take away from it, because I just want to read how your little your quote that goes along with this. It says, "I want this EP to do for other people what it did for me, to help us put a stake in the ground, to articulate why things aren't okay, and maybe take a step towards changing them. I want these songs to be an outlet for the anger, hurt, and frustration that we all feel during this process of deciding that enough is enough and learning to create healthy boundaries in our lives." Can you open up a little bit more about that? I mean, it's pretty open, but
tear it all the way open. Let's do it. So, I mean, I think a lot of it stems from the title track, which is Over It. And that I started writing probably 4 or 5 years ago and didn't finish until 2019. I was in a job that was pretty toxic, and, I won't get into too many of the details, but it had abusive elements, verbal, but it was more that the toxicity of it really like got me down and got me into a place where I was not confident about myself anymore. And even though like apparently I was really excelling at my career, I work as a video producer as well, and I was apparently doing great, but I didn't feel like I was doing great because of this kind of toxic dynamic that was going on there. It took me like 2.5 years of wanting to quit until I actually quit.
Wow.
And, there were good times in there too. Obviously it wasn't all bad, but I got so burnt out from it that I was, I ended up with like major health issues in the hospital, and like, some major things happened as a result of the stress of this job and of the whole environment. And a lot of it, had to do with me learning in that environment how to express myself, how to articulate opinions that I had, how to like put up proper boundaries between myself and the work and myself and the coworkers, which I think I'm a pretty empathic person. So I really didn't know how to do that before. Like, it was like, I was just walking in wide open, and, and then people are like, taking advantage of that perhaps.
Well, it's crazy how you kind of live your life sort of, not, I wouldn't say sheltered, but living like not thinking about that, right? Because you surround yourself with people that are good people. You surround yourself, you spend so long surrounding yourself with the people that matter to you, that have the same values as you, that when you end up finding yourself in that environment, it's a total shock. You don't know how to react to it.
It is. And especially in my role, like if you're a project manager or producer, like you're very much smack dab in the middle. I remember seeing this graphic that they made for a proposal one time that had like the entire company, including all the clients, all the higher ups, like the owner of the company, everyone was outside in this little wheel. And then my name was smack dab in the middle in a big blue circle being like, Julie Neff, it was the hub for this project, blah, blah, blah. And I was horrified. And I was like, please don't send that to them. I don't want anyone to know that, because it really was like, you're managing everyone else. You're trying to come to consensus constantly. You're trying to bring people with very different ideas, to a place where they can agree. And often you're the person that people vent to as well. So even the people that are nice people to work with, they still have frustrations, and you're the person who's going to hear about it.
Yeah.
So I really had to learn how to distance myself from that in a way where I could still empathize. I could still sympathize with them and try to help them with their problem, but not so much that it was taking over, And I think as well, because I was new to the industry, I really didn't know what was a big deal and what wasn't. And so working with one person in particular who was kind of creating this toxic environment, it was like, they would freak out about something and yell at me, for something, for like words in an email, literally like 2 words in an email, and it'd freak out. And I would only be able to assume that it was a big deal, even though it felt like it shouldn't be, So that was really a learning experience as well, of just getting to a place where I knew enough about what we were doing that I could say like, okay, that's not a big deal, or that is a big deal, and know how to navigate that better. So it wasn't until I started doing something outside of work that really gave me purpose and meaning and joy, that's what helped me really get out of that. I started this little collective, which we don't really operate anymore, but at the time we started doing acoustic concerts in my house, and then we eventually started filming, and doing those projects actually ended up bringing us around the world. It filled my soul back up. I think like that was really key for me. And I think through that experience, like a ton of emotional growth happened. I think for a long time, I just held those opinions to myself, and especially being in a position where your job is to really bring consensus of the opinions of others.
Yeah.
Like I started to articulate things that really bothered me, and the music really helped with that. How
was it though when you left? Like, what was, just to kind of close off on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because the last year there like was pretty peaceful, to be honest, because I learned how to deal with that person in particular and deal with the job in a way where I really had removed myself emotionally from the circumstance. And, and then there was talk of a promotion, and, there was like, I was promised a promotion, and then in a public meeting mentioned in front of everybody that wasn't going to happen, and like things like that, where I was like, okay, I guess like, I've wanted proof, and now you've given me like so many reasons to leave. And I always dreamt of rage quitting. Like I still do dream of like, I think it'd be really fun to just do that one day. But in the end, I left because I ended up going to Sweden to a music festival, music conference, kind of by accident. And I ended up meeting all these people and being so inspired by this conference. And I just ate it all up, and I just networked the shit out of this conference, and came back from that, like on the plane ride home, just being like, I have to quit my job. Like I need to quit my job. And I had like a meltdown when I got home of just being like, I got to get out of here. But it's scary. It's really scary to make that change. And especially to go freelance, like, it's a big deal. And so what ended up happening is we got an opportunity to go back to Sweden to film a documentary, and I had no money. I had negative a lot of money actually. And then we got back from Sweden, and someone I met at that festival invited me to Indie Week. And then at Indie Week, they invited, like SEMA invited me to go to Argentina and Chile, and we filmed a pilot thing for them. And I played for people, and I'd never played for people before. And, and that really kicked off a lot of things. And, some dark months financially followed that, but it was really like, really good at that point to just dive in, just do it.
Is this what a lot of these songs are they kind of referencing? They feel like they're all written at a very sort of moment in time. Is that sort of how this EP is? Is this sort of like, could be an album by the way that the songs are composed and written, structured?
Yeah, I mean, I think they all started at different times, but they all came together. I sent myself on a little writing retreat in 2019, and that's really where they all came together. It was like, I mean, some of them maybe were full songs before, like Siren Call, I had already recorded an acoustic version of, for instance. And What Am I Doing This For? I actually wrote for an event. It was called In the Can, where you had to present new material, and I didn't have any new material, so I wrote it in the 4 days before.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
It came together real quick. Totally. It was great.
Yeah, that's where you do your best work. Not you, but
Apparently.
I should have said you, but.
No. Sometimes you need that pressure for sure. And yeah, so I think it was really kind of collecting all the songs in this retreat that pulled it together for me, where it's like, these are all moments in time individually where I have decided that I'm done with a certain situation. Mm-hmm. And so it tied together well for me that way. And I think it also reflects the last few years of my life where there's a bit of a coming of age, in the sense that I think for me, like, I chose to release it on my birthday because 3 years ago I played the first EP acoustically in my living room for some friends on my 30th birthday. And it was kind of like I don't really give any fucks anymore. Like, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to do what's important to me. And I think in the past 3 years, I've really been trying to just be more true to what it is that I believe and what I think and what's important to me and what I'm not willing to put up with anymore. So, What Am I Doing This For talks a lot about feminism and how we're kind of sold this idea or this lie that we can have it all. You can have your career and you can have this most amazing partner and you can have children and you don't have to sacrifice anything. And that's not true. I think it's until all of us are safe enough to operate in our daily lives alone without risk of major danger, we haven't arrived at the solution. And I know that we've made a lot of strides, but watching, for instance, I watched the movie 9 to 5, which was made in 1980 for the record. So 40 years ago, they're talking about very similar situations to what we're dealing with today in the workplace, maybe a touch more extreme on the sexism side of things, but just very similar issues. And I was watching that being like, what the heck is going on here? What have we been doing? So I think it's just a bit of a reminder that for me, and Those Dreams touches on it as well, there are still so many subtle cues to me as a woman that I don't hold the power in a lot of circumstances. And I do in a lot of ways, and I think, we're really fortunate to be in the place where we are, where I can choose who I want to work with and who I don't. But that said, even in the music industry, there's so many men who are the key holders to this, magical land of music, of making it, quote unquote. I've had a lot of experiences that are just less than ideal, or not professional whatsoever. Or there's always this subtle undertone of I'm worried that at any moment you're going to start hitting on me and doing something totally inappropriate, So I think it's a collection of those moments really for me of getting to a certain place where I'm finally able to articulate what it is that is wrong, so that I can start to move out of it, and start to process that in a way where I can hopefully leave or make a change.
I kind of want to move into a little bit of sort of the visual aesthetic that you brought to it as well, to your artwork and in your photos. It's the geometric lines. It's kind of black and white photos with color overlay, frizzy hair again, which is sort of did all of that. How does that all play into sort of the overall image and, again, messaging?
A lot of it comes from my own personal style, I guess, and my own personal aesthetic. I'm very passionate about 80s vintage clothing.
Yeah.
I watched the movie 9 to 5 thinking I wish I was a businesswoman in the 80s, if solely for the fashion. I feel like I've missed my window. So I think a lot of the inspiration visually came from that, and, when it comes to the hair, I've got the permed kind of look, and that dress I'm wearing is a vintage find from Siberia Vintage. That kind of has this 80s vibe, it has a a very tiny shoulder pad.
Okay, yeah.
These like little puff sleeves, so that was kind of part of the thinking of a lot of what you're doing as an artist is branding. Your visual component is important, and people need to recognize you from your social media and recognize you from the material that you put out there. So I really wanted to kind of reflect this style and also the boldness. There's a lot of the things that I've collected from that era are like jewel tones and like really bold looks. So that's where a lot of that came from. And then the shoot itself, really, we were shooting with the over it concept in mind, of kind of this fierceness. And the art was done by a Brazilian design duo called Soli. I had met them kind of through Instagram before that. When I first went to Brazil, they had done artwork for a couple of my friends' bands. And so I just followed along. And so we explored a lot of different elements. I actually hired them to do like a general exploration. So like before actually hiring them to do the art, I think this is something coming from my producing career that I wish more people did, which is like literally set aside a chunk of money and say, let's explore ideas. What could possibly happen here? And then let's choose an idea and you can cost out for me how much that idea will cost to do. So I did that with them. And it was just really helpful for me to get a sense of what I liked and what I didn't like. And I think that's a big challenge when you're briefing a vendor of any kind in a field that maybe you don't specifically do, like you don't do that thing. So it's hard to know and hard to communicate at times what it is that you want, especially with music that's so personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
They took the 80s thing and presented me with some things that I was like, absolutely not. I was like, that is not, we're not going there.
Don't need the Saved by the Bell title to have my
Literally,
name on it.
yeah. Like, and some of the shapes and stuff, I was like, this is a little bit too, like, it feels too cheesy, And I always put together like references and mood boards and things that kind of, I think usually are fashion focused, but I think also help inspire the design process. So
cool.
So yeah, we just did a ton of exploration and where we netted out, I'm quite happy with. I think I love the photo that's on the front. I think it just there's a purposeful look in the photo that I really appreciate.
Yeah, and I don't mean any like disrespect by this, which is the worst way to start this, but it feels like there was a lot of that thought going into like the design process and like for this album. Not to say your other artwork doesn't feel like it's decided, but this obviously, again, it's sort of that you had a purpose in mind for the music and then the look and the style that really accompanied it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think in the past, and I do love the artwork that we made for Catharsis as well.
Yep.
And there's a lot of thought behind it in the sense that like from the illustrator's perspective, but in that case, I was really working with an illustrator for his style,
Right.
And I think over the past few years, I've really learned a lot about what my style is. And a lot of that has to do with, Instagram and shows and like things that you're putting out there. It's like, what do you want your brand to look like? And how do you want to be recognized? And I think I also, we had the time to really like dig into that. And I wanted to get it right. I knew this was an EP I was really proud of. And I learned a lot in the 2 years since I released the last one that I felt like was really important to communicate in that. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
So when it came to sort of planning out the release, obviously this had a part in the release plan and putting the design concept together. Did you have a strategy in place before the pandemic hit for releasing this album, or did it all kind of come together in 2020? And what kind of an impact did the pandemic have in your decision making when it came to releasing it? I
actually think for me personally, the pandemic was helpful in forcing me to pause, in forcing me to slow down a little bit. I think before the pandemic, I actually played this EP live on this tour at the very end of 2019 in Brazil. And I think I was just in a rush, I was like, let's release this in May and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And then I ended up moving back to Brazil for a job for a couple months and then I had to come back because of COVID. And it really like made me just stop for a little bit and obviously mourning the fact that I had to leave Brazil and this whole situation and the stress of the world and whatever. But then looking at starting to release it, I was like interviewing PR people and different things to find the right fit. And some of them like said things that were helpful to me, which was, why do you feel that you have to release this now? Like, why now?
Yeah.
You know, and like, and have you done XYZ research, and have you done all of this? And I had been planning before the pandemic hit to travel and to like do all this touring and stuff. And I had I guess a lot of decisions on my plate and a lot of costs as well, projected costs. And I used to say like, it kind of shrunk my sandbox in a positive way. Like I was like, okay, now the main focus is to use this material that I've already recorded and to promote it really well and to like really get it out there. So then I ended up talking to different people and radio promoters and different things. And so they were giving me advice on when to release, when it would be the most successful on certain markets, you know, or on radio. And it's always tricky to release in the summer, but they're like end of August should work for, you know, for getting into certain radio. So yeah, so I ended up kind of deciding to shift it around that. And then I had several months where I wasn't producing, and I was able to just focus on how I wanted to present it and what mattered about it, you know, and, you know, so many times I feel like we put things out there. It's like, here's a pretty new song. And then like, that's it, you know? Yeah. And I think for me, and I know you probably are going to talk about this later as well, but like, that's why I started this Neff Said series, like to actually talk about the themes behind the music. And I feel like I was able to do a lot of material in the promotion that was really about the themes behind the music instead of just being about the song or the production or whatever. So yeah, I would say I had a very loose plan before the pandemic, maybe an idealistic plan. And it helped me just kind of slow down and focus and find the right team members as well to make it happen.
Awesome. And do you sit down and think, you know, okay, I need like, you don't have you're self-managed, you're put your things out independently. How did you kind of go through the process of deciding who you needed to help you along and what parts you were going to take the role in?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always tricky when you're managing yourself. there's little accountability. And I think I tend to build in that accountability externally with different team members. So sometimes there's a consultant that I chat with sometimes who's an artist manager who's really helpful to kind of like organize my thoughts, give me some tips, like, and talking to her was really helpful because she was like, you know, people are going to respond to authenticity right now. So she was like, really reflect on what it is that you want to do. And then do that, you know, and don't do things because you feel like you have to do them, which I think is often the case in music promotion. You're like, well, I have to do X. And I think that was a big part of that. And then I was looking into PR and to radio promo, and cost was a big factor, you know, like it's not inexpensive. And when you're releasing a lot of singles, like it's kind of the world of singles right now. So it's like you release a lot of singles and it's like, for which single, like I'm not going to pay for PR for 6 months. It's like, you know, $1,200, $1,500 a month. Like it's not cheap. Right. And, so I chose for the first single that I released Over It in August of last year. And because it has that Brazilian vibe to it, I was like, I think it makes the most sense for me financially to focus press efforts in Brazil for this single to try to get my numbers up. And I did like Submit Hub, and, you know, you do all those things on your own to kind of try to get on playlists and run your own ads. And I did a promo shoot to do a little promo video for it because I couldn't do a full music video. And, you know, and that worked really well. Like the response in Brazil was amazing. The idea that I had brought, like I had to leave Brazil, but I had brought a bit of, they call it Brasilidade, like a little Brazilianness back with me, like went over really well. And, you know, and I think I love that song, but I also knew like maybe that wouldn't play as well in Canada.
Right.
So then, yeah. And then I chose to release the second single just by myself. And, you know, for being honest on this podcast, like that didn't go as well.
Yeah.
In terms of like, you know, getting the numbers up is tough. Yeah. So, you know, and I had started working again and I was maybe not as able to like focus solely on it. And And then with the third single, at that stage, I had engaged with a press person here in Canada, and also, and then I was starting to engage with another press person in Brazil for the EP, and the radio promo started as well in the US. So radio in Canada and the US, and radio is important to me because of the royalties.
Yep.
Like I've actually made, a fair amount of money from radio play in the past, and that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
I know, like we're in this, we're obviously in this to like hopefully make back what we spend or even make money. But I think that was the big thing where I was like, oh, I see the dividends from that,
Yep.
and then not to mention the exposure and people finding your music more frequently. So I knew that I felt like the songs on this EP were really radio friendly, and that is proving to be true. So that's great.
And now, does the radio promoter help you decide like which songs that would be best for radio, or do you send, just one song and say, I want this to be on radio? How does this song get placed?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the promoter, and it depends so I have a radio promoter in the US, and they actually pitched the entire EP, but they did like a primer with one single and they chose over it.
Okay.
So that's kind of their approach, but then they'll send the entire EP with the hopes that people will play any and all of the tracks on there. In Canada, the radio promotion has been more single focused. So we chose like Siren Call was one of the singles, obviously, that I released. And then we chose Swagger as the focus track for the EP when we released it. But then also sometimes there is an opportunity to kind of pitch the entire EP and kind of see what they like.
Okay.
And that's a difficult decision, like I think it's quite funny. Actually, I just found out, I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about on here, but but I just found out so CBC After Dark has played one of my songs for like a year and a half now. They played one of the songs off the first EP called Many Nights, which is a cool song, but it's not the song that I would thought would be like super successful.
Okay.
And I just found out today that they don't want any of the songs from the new EP because they're still playing Many Nights from the first EP, and they want to keep playing it. And I'm like, great, cool. Who knew that would be the song that would like bring in such sustainable income for me?
Yeah.
I did not. So when you're picking those songs, it's really tough to know, what is the song to focus on, because I think everybody responds differently to different tracks. But I think Swagger was a nice choice for the focus track. Just, I think because it's a lot of different styles on this EP. Yeah. And I think that it is kind of maybe in the middle in a way. And it's, it's a nice track. So
yeah,
it's tough to choose though.
Cool. Yeah. And obviously your music needs to be good to get onto the radio, right? There's got to be, it's got to be something.
That's the theory.
That's the theory, right? Could you just hire a radio promoter and they'll work for you as long as you pay them, or they're going to take a listen to your music and decide whether they want to work with you to submit it to radio?
In my experience, the people that I'm working with were the latter. So they were listening to it and letting me know if they would work with me or not.
Right.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I feel like to me, that's a step one of trust. It's like, do you like the material?
Yep.
Because if you don't, like, who knows,
and you're going to take my money, then you're not obviously in it for the right reasons. And who knows what kind of success you're even going to have. But if you say, yeah, great, I'm going to do this. And, they don't like, or even say they like the music, then that could obviously.
And even like, I think even not away from personal preference is like, do they think it will be successful?
Yep.
And I think that's a tricky thing to judge, for sure, especially if you're doing something a little different. But yeah, for sure. If they have a ton of experience in the music industry, like I'm working specifically with radio, which tends to be a little bit more old school, like I think that's something that's interesting as well. It's just, there's maybe different ways to promote it to radio than there are in other circumstances. So yeah, I guess the music needs to be needs to be palatable.
Yeah. And also to clear up, when you get paid royalties, that doesn't happen the next day after
Sure doesn't.
they spin it. It can take up to what, 9 months,
A
I think,
year?
a year. Yeah. Just before you
Yeah.
even see, and I don't even know how much of that is, like from when to when does that include,
Mm-hmm. So in Canada with SoCan anyways, so I think the first time I got on the radio in a significant way was July of 2019. And I think the first big royalty check that I got was like, what did they do it? It's like, I think it's February, May. I don't know. It was like May or June of the next year,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Wow.
So it does take time for sure.
Yeah.
And that's, that can be tricky, but it can also be a sweet bonus that you weren't expecting.
You weren't expecting, totally. Now you mentioned your Neff set, and you really, which is an Instagram IGTV sort of series that you did. You had guests come on, and just an opportunity to talk music, but mostly talk about the theme behind your music and this EP, which really plays into your release strategy. Was that sort of something you were thinking about before, or was this like on the fly, like, hey, it'd be great in helping to promote this album, that I have some other female artists on here to talk about the themes that could potentially affect them as well? Can you kind of go into sort of how that came about, and where people can find it and what to expect?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an idea that again kind of came during that pandemic season of the summer, the summer of 2020. And it was, maybe a month or two before the release, where, like I said before, I didn't want it to end at just the song. I wanted to really explore. It's like, I did all this blood, sweat, and tears to learn these lessons. I want to explore these themes more. And I also felt like, these are just starting points. It's just my perspective. So I feel like we can learn from so much collective wisdom and experience of different people, that I think that is hugely important, so that we don't have to always make all the same mistakes ourselves in order to get to, whatever place we're trying to get to. So I decided to start the series and have these conversations, especially around the theme of over it in particular, just because I felt like, boundary setting is becoming increasingly important. All the things that are happening in the world, it's really, I think, a lesson that we need to learn in this world where there are no limits. There's no limit to like how many ways someone can contact you at any given moment, or, all the different things that we talked about. But I'd say it's like 90% women. But I still have some other guests as well. And it's just been like I said, with Eclectic Comfort before, like, it's one of those things that just filled my soul up. Like, doing the first one, I was like, this is awesome. I love having these heart-to-heart conversations in person. It's so amazing that people feel safe enough to have these conversations with me on Instagram. And then I was getting messages after that were like mind-blowing, that were, thank you so much for that. That really inspired me to leave a toxic friendship, or like, thank you so much for that. I really needed to hear that, and it helped me do X. And I was like, I am not a therapist. I'm not, I'm not qualified in any way that way, but just, I think the idea that having these conversations out in the open can help people have the confidence, or, the courage to make certain decisions, which I think is really important. And I think, just that vulnerability, safe vulnerability, like trying to talk about things, like I always say at the beginning, I'm like, if there's any question that you're not comfortable with, we don't have to talk about it. I think I don't want to re-traumatize anyone by bringing up experiences that maybe haven't been dealt with yet, or too fresh. So that's been really cool. So we do that on IGTV or IG Live, and then it lives on my IGTV at Julie Neff Music on Instagram. And we'll be doing another 4 episodes in February, starting on February 4th. So,
awesome.
So I'm excited for that. And it's just been, a really good way to kind of let the the EP breathe in a different space.
Absolutely. No, I thought it was really cool that, again, it's just, hey, this album, this EP has, a pretty important theme to it, and these songs can resonate with a lot of people in their own unique way. Let's, talk about it and make it okay. And that really also falls around the idea of mental health and being okay to talk about mental health. It's okay to not be okay. I'd like to close just talking a little bit about mental health. Is this something, obviously it affects artists quite a lot, and we've been really seeing that over the last few years, because of how important social media, and I say, sorry, air quotes, important social media is, but especially for musicians, but the mental toll it can have on artists and creators. Social media, I think, is really added to it. Is this something that affects you as well? Or how have you sort of approached, aside from, I'm sure, writing, trying to grab a hold of that and try and control a little bit, where you feel is uncontrollable?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to talk about, and, everyone deals with things in their own way, and, the different issues. I struggle from a lot of anxiety. I don't think I've ever been maybe clinically depressed, but I've certainly dealt with sort of periods of mild depression in the past. And, I think music has been a big way for me to deal with a lot of things, but it's certainly not the only way, and it shouldn't be the only way. I think, I've also seen counselors in the past, and I think, like my friend always says, he's like, anyone over 30 should be in therapy. And I agree. I think, I think there's a place for, I think it can be dangerous sometimes when your friends are your only outlet for those discussions. And so I think it's amazing that all these resources are coming up, like BetterHelp and things that you can do online that are more accessible, than making an appointment and paying $200 and, doing all those things. So I think that's really important. I think especially as musicians, and especially in the pandemic, there is this pressure to create and to make something totally inspiring out of a global, very stressful event, like a global crisis, and I think at the very beginning, that is probably what I noticed the most, having just returned from Brazil, being very sad that my life path had altered so dramatically, also feeling the stress of everybody else I was talking to about the situations that they're in the world and everything that's going on. I saw these people doing like IG lives and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't want to. It's like, I don't want to. I don't want to be in front of people right now. I am not prepared for this. Like, I am sad and I don't want to do it. And I didn't. And I think that's a big component with music, is this, like we talked about with social media, this pressure to do certain things all the time, very publicly. Yeah. And I think it's important for us to individually really understand how and why and when we want to engage with social media and what we want to share on there too. I think I do talk about the importance of sharing, and I think that that's really, really key. But I also think there are moments where we share too soon or too much in an environment that is not appropriate. And I'm not saying this for like, that's inappropriate, you shouldn't do that. I'm saying for you, that is probably going to hurt you more than it's going to help you, And I think that's a really tricky thing, I've been really into Brene Brown in the past year. So she talks a lot about vulnerability, and she has this thing that she says, that's like, there are people who use vulnerability to hotwire connection with others, and I've been that person, and I've been in situations with those people where it's like, they'll automatically share something deeply intimate with you without knowing you at all. And you have no choice but to feel connected to them, even if you don't want to, And I think, so I think that's the really tricky thing about engaging on social media. But yeah, just back to the Bell Let's Talk thing. I think, I think especially right now, it's so hard when we're just on screens all the time, especially if you're working remotely or you're really deeply isolated. We have to find ways to connect with people in a meaningful way. We have to find ways to still be outside. And I just think it's a really tough moment, you know, and it's hard to reach out when you're in those moments as well. Like I had a lot of moments last summer where like, I think just the weight of the world, you know, like I would walk around town and I'd be like sobbing, and anxious. And, you know, it's just with everything that's going on, it's really hard to know where those feelings are coming from when you're a deeply empathic person. So, so I just think it's really important. And I think it's funny with music. I think I see patterns in the music that I'm writing where I've literally said, I wrote these 2 songs in the same month and they are the exact same song. Like they're different songs, but they're talking about the exact same thing. And I need to move on from that. Like I've consciously been like, maybe I'll write the song and produce it and make some money from it, whatever. But like in my life, I need to move on from that. And also in my writing in the future, I don't want to be writing about this thing over and over because that means I haven't grown from that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's music as therapy, but also music as a way to kind of reflect what it is that you're dealing with at any given moment. But it's always important to get the help that you need. And I think it's always important to have those people really built into your life, you know, within your means of what you can do, you know, to just be able to chat with them. And especially with a professional, you know, it's their literal job to help you and you're not burdening them. Like they're trained to be able to distance themselves enough from what you're going through. So
absolutely.
Yeah. But my heart goes out to everyone right now. And especially to musicians, to career musicians, you know, who are feeling very trapped by this whole situation. And, and I just be kind with yourself, you know, don't create if you don't want to create right now. It's okay.
Don't create right now if you don't want to create. It's okay. Thank you so much, Julie, for such a great conversation. Conversations that don't happen very often, don't happen for me very often. And I tell you, man, when you get to sit down with such an intelligent and incredibly strong woman like Julie, and you're able to talk openly about these situations that, you know, she's found herself in, and, you know, to know that she's okay to talk about that, to share her story, it means a lot. And, you know, it really makes me feel like we're doing something good here, you know, and telling these stories. Graham, any takeaways from the release day strategy side of Julie's interview?
Firstly, you know, like Julie said, was set boundaries, you know, personal life, work life, hobbies. Like you have to set those boundaries and set yourself, you know, to keep yourself protected. And, you know, moving on to more of a release day kind of lens, I think there was a lot of really good stuff. Like, you know, she said that people recognize you for your social media and the content you put out, and having a brand that's like consistent. People like, they'll just see it and they'll instantly know that it's you. And I think she was also very lucky to work with an artist and set some money aside and do like a study so they could try out like, oh, what would these like 3-4 different sort of things look like?
Totally. And because there's so many things that, you know, I feel like are kind of overlooked, right? You spend so much time on the music and trying to think, you know, everything else surrounding it, you know, the music video and things like that, that even just setting that time and that money, like she says, aside just to workshop, just to experiment, to see what can come out of it. You know, and maybe that happens in different ways. You know, you don't have to hire an agency or a designer like she did, but, you know, it can definitely happen in different ways during this process.
And, you know, once you've, you know, done the study, you've done all that, I think she also had a great idea with the Neff Said series where, you know, create your own platform and talk about, you know, if you want to talk about behind the scenes, the writing of the songs, the recording of the songs, but also like Julie Neff does, which is talk about the themes of an album, talk about the themes of a song, and really be able to kind of like break those down and bring them into, you know, kind of more real life, kind of, if that's sort of the word that I want to use, but like, you know, take the themes out of the songs, like take the story out of them and really make them grounded a little bit. And finally, something that I didn't know that I was going to say in 2021 is don't count out radio. That's that's what I've heard from, I would say, like 3 out of the 5 interviews that we've done is, they're all talking about radio play, still getting on the radio, and it's a way to make money out there, guys. Like,
yeah. Like you said, like Justin Fancy, radio, Tara Spencer got on the radio, Julie Neff on the radio, and even Stephen Stanley in our first artist interview, he has a radio show on Muskoka Radio. So, and he plays a bunch of new music and new artists. And yeah, like you said, don't count it out. That's a great point.
One thing to keep in mind that Justin Fancy said that is just a great quote, and I love it, so I'm going to say it as many times as I can, is you better have a train coming behind you in terms of, your social media presence and having people that want to hear that, song. So if you can show that you have some numbers behind it, then, you're more likely to get picked up on radio. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. Those are my takeaways from Julie Neff's interview. Alex, what do we have in music news?
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, thank you very much for sharing that. Always love what you have to take away. Coming up February 19th and 20th is the virtual, of course, because our world and our life is still virtual, the virtual Winter Folk Blues and Roots Festival. That is happening February 19th and 20th. It is free to register with the option to donate to Daily Bread Food Bank, which is a fantastic cause. And our friend Julian Taylor, episode 5 of the Release Day video series guest, is one of the headlining performances. So make sure to check out the virtual Winter Folk Blues and Roots Festival. We'll put the link in the show notes. Again, Indie Week next week, February 16th to 20th, 2021. That is kicking off. Some speakers include Chris Robley and Kevin Bruner from CD Baby, and Mike Warner, the author of Work Hard, Playlist Hard, among a ton of other speakers. And again, that is all talking about music and video games and virtual reality, and really how music is integrating into the digital world.
And that is their Screen by Screen Festival.
That's it.
So make sure you go pick up some tickets, go check that out. I know I've been interacting with them on Twitter a little bit. They've been asking some good questions about, do you post to YouTube? Do you Twitch stream? Like all these sorts of things. So definitely just trying to get my nose in there before the festival even starts.
That's awesome. Graham, we talked last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, about a band that you mentioned, Soft Cult. And this is a couple of the members of the band Courage My Love. They have formed a new band called Soft Cult. And along with it, we found something pretty cool. They've actually released a zine along with the single. It sounds like it's going to be a monthly thing. What more do you know about this? So
it's a monthly zine, and I know in the first one, it was only 8 pages, but some really good stuff talking about, just their experience. So similar to Julie Neff, just talking about, some of the things that you have to deal with, some of the, inherent misogyny that is out there right now, still, unfortunately. And, one thing that Julie Neff said in the interview was, watching movies and TV shows from like the sort of 80s, and how a lot of the themes there, it's very similar to the conversations that we're still having here today in 2021. So this is just, another way for the members of Soft Cult to sort of express their feelings towards it, their experiences, while also showcasing some art, poems, anything like that from the readers of the zine. So I'm expecting this thing to pop off. Like, this thing is going to be incredible, and it's monthly. It's free, or you can pay and have a physical copy, or free if you just want to read it on like your internet browser, something like that. And you can subscribe to it, get it directly to your email box. Yeah, this is really cool, really well put together. It is just so reminiscent of the punk magazines that came out when punk was really first thriving in America. And man, it is just so cool, like so well done from these young ladies. And yeah, go check it out. Go give it a read. It is it's powerful, and they've got a lot to say, and there's a lot to think about. So it's softcult.band/zine. Graham, tell me, what kind of music you've been listening to for the last week? I know we generally have a few songs we pick from. We never tell each other about
what we're listening to before we sit down and do this. Tell me what is on your playlist.
Man, I went all over the place this week. I'll be honest.
No surprise, I don't think, but
no, I know I picked some weird stuff. So all of these were released February 5th, 2021. And the first one that, really was interesting to me was Glass Apple Bonsai. This Love, the Grendel remix. It was someone that I just found. My favorite new thing is to go on Bandcamp, search, Canada, Toronto, find everything. Some of the newest releases, hottest releases that are coming out of this, this space, this country. And really just being able to dive into those. So Glass Apple Bonsai, This Love, the Grendel remix. It's a really interesting song, really well done. Love the remix. And then I was also listening to The Weather Station.
Yeah.
With the song Parking Lot. Oh my God. Just the vibes and like the feels in that song was just like it can't even describe it. It's so good.
Yeah, it's so great that you bring her up, man, because I was just listening to her interview, Tamara Lindemann, with Tom Power on CBCQ, and just so great to hear her speak. If you can, go check that interview out. But sorry to cut you off there, but it's great pick, great song, great album. The album is Ignorance. Go check it out. Fantastic music.
And then finally, I've got, some more heat. This is really like dreamy, very textural music, and it's Luna Lee, the Jams EP. So these were all like just a collection of sort of IGTV, like short little 1 minute, couple 30, 40-second sort of jams. And so the whole EP is only 10 minutes, but like it's incredible. She plays like, I don't know, like 10 instruments. Like there's a harp in there, there's violin, guitar, bass, like everything. And they're just so pretty to listen to and just, incredible. Highly recommend. Go check it out. And there's not enough good things that I can say about it. So Alex, that's who I've been listening to this week. Let me know, who have you been listening to?
Yeah, so I've been listening to a song by John Orpheus called Fella Awoke, I Will Miss You, released February 4th. And this is a song that tells the story of the death of Nigerian music legend Fela Kuti, Jamaican icon Bob Marley, and John's own grandmother. John describes this song as celebrating our heroes by letting them go to become our own. I also am listening to this song Home by the band Narima, and they are a punk rock band that is just, man, they're just so cool. They got influences from Green Day to Paramore and 21 Pilots. Like, it's just a really cool sound that this band is making. So if you can, check out their new song Home that came out on January 31st. And lastly, I've been listening to Asiatic African, and that is the project of 3Card and Papito Scotty. And I heard about 3Card from Julie Neff's EP. So he and Papito Scotty have formed this new project of theirs called Asiatic African. They released a couple songs. What came out January 8th was Trenches. So if you like hip hop, you like rap, go check out Asiatic African.
So if you need to find music this week, you're going to check out John Orpheus, Narima, Asiatic African, Luna Lee, Glass Apple Bonsai, and The Weather Station. Boom. Playlist made. Let's go.
Speaking of playlist, actually, if you head to our Spotify, you can search Release Day Series playlist. And actually, we've got a playlist of all these. We're going to drop it in the show notes. But any music selections that we pick week to week, you're going to find these songs on our newly curated playlist.
And if following us on Spotify isn't enough for you, you can follow us on Instagram at releaseday_series. Facebook, you can just search Release Day Series. And on Twitter, you can check us out at releaseday SRS. And if that still isn't enough for you, you want to check out all the video episodes that we do, you can check out our website, releasedayseries.com. And, who knows, we're maybe doing some other stuff up there soon.
thank you so much for always listening. And if you could, please give us a nice 5-star rating where you can. Leave us maybe a nice little comment. It really helps get the podcast discovered and helps get the word out about these awesome artists. And if you're releasing music, please send it to us. We'd love to hear it. Contact releaseday@gmail.com. Again, all of this is going to be in the show notes, so you don't have to go searching or hitting back 15 seconds on the podcast player. Go check out the show notes. Hit us up. We'd love to hear your music. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, we have the full interview with Julian Taylor. You can check out his short form video interview about his album, The Ridge, on our website, releasedayseries.com. I'm Alex Heward.
I'm Graham Beery.
Thank you so much for listening to Release Day.